All right, how's everything going? Welcome back. We are now on to our second part for our animation episode. I am back. We had a bit of a hiatus, but I got my Hawaiian shirt on. I'm feeling good. Let's start coding. Let me turn off this camera. There we go. So where we left off, we finished our two movement animation as well as our animation classes, and now we just got to implement it in our main class. To start, we have a new PNG that we added. So if we remember, well, I already added it, but how I did that, add existing item, and then I went to my resources, images, and I clicked on flesh full. We're going to be implementing this sort of animation here. So if you notice from this array here, we have 4 different idle animations. This is idle down, idle up, idle right, idle left, and then we have 4 different walk cycles. So this is walk down, walk up, walk right, and then finally walk left. So we can deal with this with 2 different for loops, one being the 4 different idle animations, just being single rectangles for each of them, just adding them as their own animations. So if you remember in our movement animation class, we have this, that is the wrong one. In our animation class, we have this add function where we can add a vector of different source components, which are just rectangles, into an ideable animation, and then we play them with our movement animation. So that's what we did in the previous episode. So now we got to add all those animations. So, but first, let's change out this our old PNG. So we were using just the flesh.png. Now we're going to be dealing with the fleshfull.png. And the next thing we got to set up, we'll go below all of our declarations here for our player components. And we're going to create a giant mess of for loops. To start, though, we're going to create a bunch of different animations. So they're just going to be hard-coded in. So these are the different animations that our player can go through. In the future, we'll have a file storing this, but that's the future. Now is now. Now we hard-code. Later, we plan and make good decisions with our lives. So this is going to be an array of strings. We're going to start off with idle down, if you remember from the image. And then rather than going back and forth between the image and setting it up that way, I'm going to do the old-fashioned way, which is have a bunch of notes where I've already done it, and then I'm going to copy and paste it in. So that's what we're doing here. So idle up, idle down, or sorry, well, it starts with idle down, then idle up, right, left, walk down, up, and right, and then left. Pretty simple stuff. So let's start cracking out our for loops here. To start, we got to cycle through all of our animations in order. So we're going to define an iterator for that. It's going to be called anim iterator, or anim I. And that's just going to be equal to 0. And the next bit, we got to come up with our entity, which we're going to be storing all of our animations. And for now, we're just going to attach them to our player component. Actually, we'll attach them to our game. Why not? We'll attach them to our game. So animation, and that is going to be eGame. And it's going to be add ID child. And we're going to call that child animation. Really creative sort of stuff here. We're really going all our way. So to iterate through our image, we have an image width here. So it's going to be 64 times, what is that? Looks like 8. So 64 times 8 by 64 times 2, or 128. We have to iterate through each of these, and then obviously ending at the end there. But since we have animations and we know exactly how many frames we're going to be counting, it's going to be pretty easy to do. We just know there's 1 frame for each of the idle animations and then 2 frames for each of the walk cycles, and then we can just stop after the fact. So all we have to do is come up with how we can iterate through it. We're just going to use a simple approach, modulate by the width for the row, and then we're going to divide using integer division to find the define the row, modulating to find the column. That's how we're going to do it. But to do that, we got to find our width. So how many frames there are in a single width of our image. To do that, we're going to need the image texture, which has a nice function called width to help us figure that out. So let's call that function here, or that variable here, flesh text columns. And then to calculate the column count, we're going to use c flesh text dot width, and we're going to divide that by 64. And I believe width is an unsigned integer, so we'll just go ahead, help out the compiler here, and cast that as an unsigned integer as well. Then we'll start off on our first for loop here. So auto I is equal to 0. I is less than 4 because there's 4 idle frames. And then plus I. And we'll come up with our first rectangle. We'll call this idle rect. And let's go ahead and define it like so. So we know the width and height. It's going to be really easy. Each of these images are width at 64 by 64, all using float values. And then the next bit for the x and y, we're going to have to cast to float. And as I said before, we're just going to be modulating to find the width because that gives us their column or x position. So to do that, we're going to use our anim I to find what animation we're on. Modulate that by, not that, but that's the modulate function, by our our column size, or how many columns we're going to be dealing with, and then multiplying that finally by 64.0f. Now I believe we could just divide it, modulate by the width. I wonder if that would work. I'm not entirely sure, because I feel like we're dividing by 64 here and then multiplying it. Doesn't really make sense, but this is how I did it prior, so I'm just going to continue to do it this way. I mean, I think this doesn't really even come up later. We have it's all done through like Sprite sheets, so we have the positions in like JSON files that we just encode and then make things work out. So I guess doing it like this is completely fine. It doesn't really matter about the runtime because this is not really going to be used in the later portion. But I believe we could just get rid of this division here and then it would work without. But I'm not entirely sure. I'm sorry. But I know this works, so I'm just going to continue doing this. Anyways, so that gives us our idle recs. So we're going to have 4 of them. And then every frame we're going to increment anim I just below here. I'll show you exactly what we're doing here. First off, we're going to be defining the idle component rect. So it's going to be C source idle is going to be equal to our E animation or entity animation that we defined. It's going to be add ID component. Actually, let's do pushback component so we don't have to give it a name. And then do component source. We're going to push through our idle rect into that source component there. And then from there, we're going to add the animation. So to do that, we're going to get our CSU claw animation, call the add function, and the string name is going to be pretty easy since we have it defined in a nice, neat array right here. So anims, at the anim position I, and then we increment I after the fact. With, and this is just a vector of animations. So component, system, update, and then anim. And then let's just define the idle rect inside of that, or sorry, not the idle rect, but the source idle rect. Pass that through, and then we have all of our animation, or all of our idle animations defined. So the next bit, so still keeping with our anim position I, we're going to go ahead and find our walk cycles. So walk cycles have two different animations involved with them. So we're going to deal with another for loop with 4 different animations involved. And then we're going to kind of do a pretty hacky sort of solution to this. I'm not entirely sure what my thought process was when making this, but I know it works, so that's cool. This is going to be walk 1 rect, and we just add I, so the I position, so it's going to start off at 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. And we're going to modulate and divide that by our columns, just like before. And then for the second one, we're just going to add 1 to that. So this is walk 2 rect, it's I plus 1. And that will find our second frame of our walk cycle for each of our different rects. And we're going to need 2 different source components to hold these walk cycles. So this is going to be source walk, and then we'll call it walk 1, and walk, oops, caps lock there, walk 2, and then input our walk recs, walk 2 rect, and walk 1 rect. And then still utilizing the same, anims in I plus what plus plus. Instead of just adding a single source rec, we're going to add 2 source recs. So we'll copy and paste that here into there. And then finally for our source rect 2, there we go. And if you remember from our first video, from the previous video, we implemented the classes, but we did not add them to our update system. So let's go ahead and do that here. Let's come ahead and let me just copy and paste this twice. And then let's go ahead and find our systems. So we have, let me actually find the order. We're going to start with move first. So movement animation is going to go directly after camera, and then our regular animation that we update our frames, we're going to do it after we figure out what animation we're playing. So it calculates what direction it's moving, whether it's idling, before increasing the frames, so we have like a consistent basis for that. Though it kind of moves so quick that it doesn't really matter. This is just the ordering that I landed on. All right, let's go ahead and run that. Everything should work perfectly as it always does. We only code on first tries on this channel. And there you have it. We now can actually walk around in our grassy field that we created. So look at that. Kind of almost is starting to look like a video game now. We have a nice movable character. He has a cool walk cycle. His ears jiggle when he runs. It's really cool. All right. That's going to do it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you for subscribing. we'll continue more of this. We have plenty of more content to go over. I think I'm on like episode 24 in my main project, so I just kind of have to digest that and implement it into videos, which will be coming out shortly. I know my schedule has been a bit rough, especially lately. Work's come up. Well, work hasn't come up, but you know, I got stuff I'm doing. You know, it's tough, but I do have time for this, so I'll be making more. Don't you worry. Thank you guys so much, and goodbye.